Right, so like straight off the bat, and I want to kind of just mention this because I know that this video's title it would be considered treason in this country. This video is more so like my problems with Doctor Who, and not necessarily the problems with Doctor Who. Like these are problems that kind of cropped up and mainly spawned within me from watching the final of the 60th special at the Giggle. And the reason I'm saying this is definitely like my problem with Doctor Who and not the problem with Doctor Who is because like I go on Twitter after watching the episodes and I see a lot of people are giving them like 9 out of 10s and stuff. And I'm sure like a lot of these people are like, you know, big Doctor Who fans, like bigger fans than I am, who like watch Doctor Who a lot longer than me and understand like what makes a good Doctor Who episode. In terms of what my relationship with Doctor Who is, I watched it growing up and just sort of mainly more or less only watched the Tennant era. Like I was pretty into it, not obsessed. Like I remember going to like the Doctor Who kind of like museum thing and I had like a toy sonic screwdriver. I like how I had to like note that it was a toy version, like that doesn't like go without saying. And I had like this TARDIS money box that would say like Tennant quotes when you press the button, like no second chances, I'm that kind of a man. So I would say as a young and I enjoyed me some Doc Who. So it's no surprise that when they brought him back, they brought me back. And from watching that first episode, I had like a couple thoughts that I'm sure many people, especially people with a similar relationship to Doctor Who as me, would have had after watching that first episode, which were, this is ridiculous, and has it always been this ridiculous? And to answer both of those thoughts, yes, this is ridiculous, and yes, it has always been this ridiculous. It's just something that I think was jarring for a lot of people, kind of like jumping back into it, especially when they hadn't watched it in so long. But it was something I definitely reacclimated to like very quickly and was like fine with and was enjoying it again. Like I don't want people to think like Doctor Who just isn't for me, like tonally it's just like not a show for me and I should just stick to beige Marvel or stuff like that. My issues aren't actually with like how pantomime or like camp it can be. I actually like enjoy and respect the show for like the arena it can create, how it can like be unapologetically Doctor Who and like can do things that if I saw in a Marvel movie I would like reject and hate and maybe even rank the film lower because of it. Like this genuinely is like a compliment, by the way. Like I don't think it's easy to create a vibe where the audience watches the show and it's like the show that is just straight up fun and you buy into the magic that they're peddling. With that being said, when it gets to more crucial elements of the show, I think more thought and time has to be put into the construction of those elements and the decisions being made and the reasonings being more than just because it's fun, because why not? Like I have a couple moments written down here, like when Doctor Who puts on a wig and turns a car park into a courtroom, nice. When he clicks a button to raise the floorboards to drop a fake Donna at the last moment to go save the real Donna while using the TARDIS like a skateboard, cute. When Neil Patrick Harris has a musical number whilst killing people in like the Avengers Tower, sure. But when it's getting down to like regeneration and like the TARDIS and the Doctor, you know, like the vital organs of the show, like just doing things like doing open heart surgery and just making certain decisions on a whim because it's fun, like it doesn't always work for me. Much how I'm sure like RTD must feel burdened by some of like the repercussions or whatever that have been put on him from like previous showrunners with the Flux and stuff. I'm sure future showrunners will now feel the same things with some of the stuff that he's brought up in this episode, The Giggle. Like I don't have an issue with new things. It's the 60th anniversary of a show. It's been going on a long time. You've always got to keep it fresh. But it's the fact that something being new is kind of the only description or reason given to us for why it's being done. And it's like in isolation. I don't mind the Doctor getting his face back or him splitting during regeneration and the idea of having the Doctor interact with a new self and the old one going off and doing his own thing. Like those are things that could be presented to me in a pitch and I'd go, yeah, sure, those sound fresh, those sound new, they sound like fun. But then I feel like what's important is then having to work on the why, you know, that these things happen and then the repercussions of those things happening. Like the story beats ironically actually mirror like the same issues that are presented to the Doctor in these specials, which is that he's just constantly running from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing and never like pausing to like think about what's happening around him and stop. I feel like so much of Doctor Who feels like and then with a promise to be told why later. And like whilst watching in the moment I can't help but feel like the show is like being written as I'm watching it, if that makes sense. Like the show doesn't know what's gonna happen next just as I don't, and like not in a good way at times. Like the Doctor's ability to be presented with an issue or conflict and then within the same breath go, what if, and then proceed to act on that working theory to immediately then solve that issue is kind of lame to me. I think that's what I like really couldn't just get over when it came to this final episode. With all these things being thrown at me, what really got me was like the Looney Tunes ass moment where he like grabs the mallet and doubles up the TARDIS. It just felt so like, oh, why not? And like lazy to me. And in that moment, what I was watching wasn't a show. Like I could just like see through it and I just felt like I was watching a showrunner do something because he had these characters that people like and he wanted to get them in a certain place for spin-offs or whatever, and not because it actually made sense to the actual characters' stories. So what made sense for like these fictional people, I could like like see through and behind and like see the strings that were being pulled, if that makes sense. Actually, again, mirroring the show in a way, the Toy Master at play. And I think I kind of feel like the self-policing of Doctor Who fans, that with any kind of like gripe you have or like issue with an episode or a show that you bring up, it's immediately, well, that's just Doctor Who for you. And yeah, well, Doctor Who's just like, it's just a bit of fun. And it's like, yeah, well, Doctor Who's camp and it's always been like that. Like, it really just like limits how good or like how much better your show that you love so much could be. And like, it gives the people making the show an excuse to never have to put any thought or effort into some of the things they do, because that's how people will just always consume it. It's not even that like I need things to be like explained to me at every moment in depth for me to be like fine with it. It's just that like it feels like they find these cool destinations they want, and it's just not that much thought that goes into the journey. I want these new things to happen, and I need these characters to end up in this situation, but it just feels like the means to then get those characters and these people to these places and these situations, it's just like the first thing that came to their head, because ultimately the payoff will be what's clipped up and what people will love on Twitter, and it's what ultimately you want. And even if it's not the first thing that came to a head, like it feels that way on screen when it's the first thing that comes to the character's head to then get out of these situations. Like, it's how you're literally presenting it to me. And yeah, like it's a bit of fun, but how long can I just live for fun alone, you know, before I get like hungry for more depth or consequence, you know? I don't always need like explanation, but I need to feel like there is real, you know, stakes or reason to what is happening sometimes. I don't know, I did overall enjoy these episodes, believe it or not. I just feel like sometimes the show presents things that will obviously bring up some questions within you as an audience, and that would even send like the biggest of Doctor Who fans into making the longest of threads on like Twitter to like try and explain what's happening with headcanon. And I just don't always appreciate being presented with what actually might be an interesting question, but then like immediately being like batted away by like what feels like the writers or whatever immediately when I like try and think about it, and then it's just like, oh, it is fun, you know, it's like, it's new, you know, don't, you know, like in these moments I kind of feel like Oliver Twist with my little bowl just like asking for more, and they're like, more because it's fresh and I want to and it's fun, now fuck off. But it's just like as I've said, like I'm ultimately happy enough with where you've left them and this little clip and this little soundbite here, but it's just the more like the in-story explaining away, if you get what I mean. You know, I did like seeing Shooty on screen with David Tennant, like that was nice and that was fresh. And although we did have to share a screen in what would usually be like your moment, I think you got to see enough of his charisma and personality as the Doctor going forward that gives me confidence that he'll be like a great Doctor. Please don't be too aggressive with your like your opinions in response to whatever my opinion was throughout this, because like sometimes a lot of people will be like, well, this was the intentions, and actually, you know, the showrunner said this in this interview, and like sometimes like the intentions don't match up with the execution or how you perceive it as like being the consumer or something. And I'm just like honestly speaking about how I happens to feel about some of the choices made in the show or whatever, and what I'm sure will happen going forward as well. And that's more the reason I'm saying this, because I think it's going to be like a continual thing. Still enjoyed it enough though. Thanks.